All right, in an effort to bring up grades, I'm doing quick quiz reviews to walk through the content for each quiz. For quiz 13, it's all about World War One, but World War One's an interesting war because we don't really actually study the actual battles. We study more of the causes, what's going on at home during the war, and then the fallout to it. So let's start with the causes. First thing you got to understand is the context. The United States is previously, we're trying to stay neutral. We do not want to get involved in European affairs. We see this as a European war. This goes all the way back to George Washington's farewell address, his Neutrality Acts, and the Monroe Doctrine. So we have a lot of establishment to stay out of European affairs. So what caused this to change? Well, the biggest thing would be that our neutrality was violated at the seas. This was because Germany was practicing something called unrestricted submarine warfare, which is where they had an area of the ocean and they were basically attacking any ship that they saw. This included a famous cruise ship called the Lusitania, which sank and exploded. It actually exploded because the US was smuggling the British war materials, but it killed American citizens. The United States got very upset about this, and Germany actually stopped this unrestricted submarine warfare for a while because of how mad the U.S. got at this. They're going to have to start it back up, though, and when they do, they send something called the Zimmerman Telegram to Mexico, which was basically asking Mexico if they would be willing to declare war on the United States if the U.S. declared war on Germany. This ultimately causes the United States to join World War I. An underlying cause is also going to be Woodrow Wilson, the president at the time, and his idea of moral diplomacy. And this idea came from this basic concept that democracies are good. Germany was not a democracy, and so therefore Wilson thought that Germany was not good and led to us also getting involved in this war. All right, so at home, there was a draft, a military draft was instituted. The Selective Service Act was created. Very controversial. There were lots of protests. Mostly white men were drafted. Black men were drafted as well, but more white men were drafted. But these jobs needed to be filled, and so that actually gave Black people an opportunity to move up to the north to fill these factory jobs. So most Black people are living in the South at this point. This causes a mass migration. It's called the Great Migration of Black people to move up to northern cities. This is a picture of a train station as people are waiting to go up to the north. Also, during this time, there was limitations of freedom of speech. It's called the Espionage and Sedition Act. This was where you couldn't speak badly about the draft or the government during this time. This is actually propaganda of this act of basically you need to be quiet about the war. The idea was if you spoke badly about the war, then people might not actually go fight in the war. If we didn't go fight, then we'd lose and we'd all die. Now, Eugene Debs is going to lead protest against this. He's going to get arrested for it. He was a socialist. He was seen as a radical. And he actually ran for president while in prison, got third place, which is pretty good. And this is a callback to other times when the United States has limited freedom of speech during wars. And the Alien Sedition Acts is the most obvious answer during the quasi-wars that we kind of fought with France. You could even look forward during World War II. There was limitation of people's freedoms like the internment camps that the Japanese had to live in. After 9/11, you have the Patriot Act. So this is a common theme through the United States history. This seems like a very clear violation, though, of the Bill of Rights, your ability to have freedom of speech and freedom of protest. But under Schneck versus the United States, the Supreme Court actually upheld it, and they basically stated that this was like screaming fire in a theater that would cause a clear and present danger of public panic. And for the World War I fallout, so Woodrow Wilson wants to create this lasting peace, this peace without victory. He wanted world peace, and it's called the 14 points. And these 14 points are basically broken down into these four categories. He wants the seas to be neutral. He wants to limit trade barriers. He wants to end colonization, this idea called self-determination, which is that a people group should get to rule their own country. And the last point is the League of Nations, which was this international peacekeeping organization. Now, the Europeans are not going to really be on board with a lot of this. And this is kind of depicted in this political cartoon you see right here as they're all crying babies. They don't really like much of this. The only actual thing that they really agree to is the League of Nations. And that's kind of ironic because if you look at this political cartoon right here, the keystone to this League of Nations is actually going to be the United States, meaning the United States is going to be the one that's going to make this bridge work. And guess which one the United States doesn't like at all? The United States does not like the League of Nations. We want to go back to our old way of neutrality. Some people didn't really want us to get involved in World War I to begin with. We want to go back to neutrality. We don't want anything to do with this. Wilson is going to fight hard for this. He's actually going to go on this big train tour where he's going to give lots of speeches. The Senate hates him, though. The Senate is the one that actually signs treaties. The Treaty of Versailles would have had us join the League of Nations. They don't like him. He's a Democrat. They're Republicans. They don't like his idea. So Wilson loses in more ways than one. Not only do we not sign the treaty, Wilson also has a massive stroke while he's trying to get Americans to agree to it. And basically is a vegetable for the rest of his life. All right. Now, post-World War I society, you're going to have immigrants coming from Germany, Russia, and Italy were really, really disliked. And so there was a lot of different acts that were created to stop them from coming. This back picture right here is representing the Quota Acts of 1921 and 24, which basically took all these Europeans and had them be funneled so only very few of them could come. And the reason why these immigrants were disliked so much was actually because of the propaganda from World War I. We had a heavy propaganda campaign that really demonized Central Europeans, like that they ate babies. And, you don't want baby eaters to come to your country. So obviously there's going to be some resentment towards those Europeans. And because of that, the 1920s society is really known as an anti-immigrant society in our time period of being very, very open towards European immigration, which you could argue we never were fully open to it, but that whole big rush is going to end at this point. All right. And that's what you need to know for this quiz. Good luck.